What's up, everyone? This is the Dark Iron Gains Community Fitness Podcast, Episode 1. I am going to try and do these podcasts sort of on a, I guess you would say, weekly basis. But if I can't, I'll go ahead and try and aim for more of a bi-weekly basis or even a once-a-month basis, depending on how crazy life gets, because we all have issues in life that we have to tend to, and lately my life has been pretty crazy in a good way. I've been doing a lot of positive movements in the right direction. It just takes a lot of time and effort to get that stuff going. Luckily, no drama-free life right now. But this is basically the first episode of the Community Fitness Podcast, and I'm going to be talking about whatever I feel like talking about on these podcasts. I'll probably have a guest or two here and there. Probably nobody too famous. Maybe just a couple meme lords, and whoever else I deem worthy of coming on the podcast. Although those credentials, the credentials to get on here aren't going to be that insane. So anyways, I just wanted to give a quick introduction, and I want to let you guys know that I'm going to try and do this on a weekly basis if I can. If not, definitely I will do it on a bi-weekly basis. So I just wanted to talk about basically meeting the world with the same amount of force it is meeting you with. So I've noticed I live in a city right now, and I don't live in the inner city. Luckily, I live on the outskirts of a city, but it's a pretty populated city. And I've noticed, man, cities, they get to be like, people are so rude for no reason. It's like everyone's got their own thing going on. I get it, but it's like you get an attitude everywhere you go. If you go through a fast food restaurant, it's like, man, giving them your order, they're almost offended at what you have to say, right? It's like, hey, can I get the number one with a large Diet Coke? And all you get back is, It's like they're so pissed at you for ordering, for coming in and ordering through the drive-thru like everybody else. It's like, man, if you don't like your job, bro, then go ahead and get a new job. If you don't like taking people's orders at a drive-thru, then work somewhere else where you don't have to talk to people. Work somewhere where you don't have to have any customer service, because as of now, while I sit in the drive-thru, I'm getting literally zero customer service, except at Chick-fil-A. If you go to Chick-fil-A, they're welcoming, and they're very polite. I give them my order, and they are always happy to see me. They're always smiling. But if I go through like a Sonic drive-thru, it's like they hate me. They automatically hate me for just pulling up within a 5-mile radius. So, like I was saying, living in the city, man, it's not just fast food. It's like everywhere you go, somebody's got an attitude for no reason. And back in the day, when I was a wee lad in high school, and even my early adulthood years, my early 20s, people would be rude, and naturally, I have a natural inclination to sort of try and de-escalate the situation. So I would sit there and kind of, take it, so to speak. They would be giving me an attitude for no reason, and I'd sit there like, oh, yes, sir, no, sir, okay, well, have a good day, Basically, sucking up and getting zero give on their end. It's like the nicer you are to someone who's being rude, the ruder that person is going to be to you, because now you're just another doormat that they can walk all over and they can feed their ego with. And so I learned to kind of meet them with the same force, if not more force when it comes to being rude. So nowadays, I've learned the best way to respond to someone who's being rude or out of line is to be even ruder or be even more out of line to them, because then they typically back down. And if they don't back down, then you got to be willing to kind of stand your ground and bark even louder, so to speak, right? So, like for instance, there was a lady who lives under me in my apartment complex. And, I was up in my apartment complex, jumping around, exercising, I was making a lot of noise, I'll give her that. But she came to my house, like she knocked on my door and said, I answered, I was like, hey, what's up? And she basically came to my house and without any sort of introduction or anything, just right off the bat, asked, what are you doing in here? And so, this being my house, someone coming up here and asking me what I'm doing in my own house, to me, that's disrespectful. So I sat there and, for about 1 second, I looked her straight in the eye, no response, blank face. And I said, it's none of your business what I'm doing up here. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to have to call the office. And I said, you do what you got to do. And I slammed the door and kept exercising. And, I never heard from the office. And I've never heard from that lady again. So moral of the story is to basically be intimidating, stand your ground, and be a little bit more violent with your approach than the person who is perpetrating the action, right? So if someone comes up to you, you're just minding your own business, and someone comes up to you and says, dude, you are ugly, bro. I just want to punch you in the face. Then you have to look at them and say, you know what, dude? I'm about to punch you in the face, and then just punch him in the face. Just kidding. That's a bad example. I'm trying to think of something real, something that actually is practical. But what I'm trying to say here is if someone approaches you in a way that's crossing the line, that automatically gives you the right to cross their line, right? You can't just sit there and let them cross the line while you basically play fair. You have to play unfair, right? So if someone's crossing the line on your end, then you have to cross the line on their end. Except you have to cross the line and go above what they're going to. Because 9 times out of 10, that person will back down. And if they don't, then you just stand your ground and escalate it to the appropriate manner, or escalate it to the appropriate volume, I would say. And, be ready. If you have to, be ready to do what you got to do to prove that you're serious about it, to prove that you don't like these people crossing your boundaries, right? Our good friend Jordan Peterson spoke about this on a podcast I was watching. I can't remember whose podcast it was, but he talked about, in the Bible, it says, the meek shall inherit the earth, right? So the meek shall inherit the earth. Now, what does meek necessarily mean in that translation? It doesn't mean like feeble, weak, sickly, timid. No. What meek means in that situation is more or less humble, right? You have to have a big stick, but never use it, right? You have to be able to back your stuff up, even if you don't have to use it, right? So you have to basically be a total beast, right? You have to be a monster, right? But only know when to call upon it when it's necessary. Another example, I work in the blue collar industry, and in this industry, as a lot of you may know, you have to have some thick skin. You have to be able to kind of roll with the punches, you know what I mean? Like you have to be able to BS with the guys. Kind of poke fun at each other, whatever. You're going to have people who don't talk to you fairly. And when that happens, you just meet them with the same amount of respect they give you. So if they're giving you 0 respect, you meet them with the same amount of respect, which is 0. And typically they'll kind of back off, unless they're just a total douche. Then in that case, you really have to come at them, right? Or just, do something to get them off your back. Whether that's work harder than them, have the boss's favor, whatever. But anyways, I had a boss and I worked on heavy machinery for a long time, and I had a boss who was a total narc, man. This guy was such a hard ass, like, dickhead, more or less. And he was always disrespectful. No matter what, he was yelling at you. You were never doing anything right the way this guy saw it. And that was, at the time, whatever. I was in my early 20s. I was working, trying to support my girlfriend at the time, who is now, I am glad to say, my fiance. I was trying to support her in school while also trying to pay my own bills and pay rent and so on and so forth, car note, cell phone, you know how it goes. So anyways, I was basically in a spot to where I couldn't lose this job. So I never really stood up against this guy or got in his face or anything like that. I just kind of stood there and took it until one day my girlfriend, now my fiance, she graduated, right? So now I don't necessarily have that burden of paying and putting her through school like I did. So now all the money that was going to her schooling was going to my savings. And so as soon as I got my savings up to a secure amount, I went ahead and felt secure enough to leave the company. So I waited. I didn't just bounce out of that place. I waited. And one day, I was working on, I worked on heavy machinery. So it's a bunch of like hydraulic oil and, diesel engines, all that sort of stuff. And so I was working on a backhoe, and we had to pull the transmission out of it. And the way you do that is you lower the legs all the way down, and it lifts the backhoe up, and you basically put stands under it, and you lift the legs. And now your backhoe's on stands. You got enough room to work down there to pull the transmission. And so I was working on that. It was taking me a little bit just because I hated working on heavy machinery. But so I'm under there. I'm doing my thing, minding my own business. And here comes this guy, right? My boss. And he's like, you haven't, he sits there and he stares at me. You still haven't got that thing out? And I'm like, no, not yet. And he's like, well, you better do it, because otherwise, man, that's your job. And I was like, okay. And so that moment, that split second, I decided, you know what? I'm leaving, right? I was basically waiting for him to give me a reason to leave, and that was it. So I crawled out from under there. The backhoe at this point, or the transmission on the backhoe at this point, was on a stand, right? You have a jack that you use to lower it out once you get everything disconnected. And I had it on the jack, almost ready to get lowered. If he would have just waited 5 more minutes, I would have had that thing out of there. So I got out of there. I crawled out from under the backhoe and loaded up all my tools and then walked out. I left. That was my last day there. And so he calls me the next day, because I hadn't showed up for work, of course. And he calls and he's like, hey, are you coming in today? And I was like, yeah, I'm coming in. I'm just running a little late. Little did he know I was actually at the local FedEx, printing out resumes, hanging out with my fiance. She's out of school, so we're just kind of hanging out. We're getting coffee, chilling, having fun, and I was out job hunting. So, it all it took was a split second of me just thinking, you know what, I'm not going to let this guy disrespect me anymore. I'm taking myself out of this toxic situation and building a new life for myself. So I stood up, got out of there, quit, left that toxic situation. And from that, I learned to basically not let anyone put you in a situation you're uncomfortable with, right? You don't have to stick around. You don't have to take what people are throwing at you. And if people are throwing stuff at you, as far as insults go, as far as anything, any sort of mental manipulation, anything like that, you don't have to hang out with those people anymore. You don't have to let people convince you to do stupid stuff that you don't really want to do. You just have to have the self-awareness and the self-respect to stand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to do this, or even cut people out of your life, whatever, Stand up to people, stand up for yourself, and sit there and say, I'm not taking this anymore, right? If someone's rude to you, be rude to them. You know what I mean? If someone's rude to you, if someone's crossing that line, you have the right automatically to cross their line, like I said. So go ahead, cross that line, but cross it with a fierce passion and with fire, you know what I mean? With fire in your eyes. Let them know you're serious. There was another instance when I was at a bar. You know, I was just hanging out, drinking, whatever. And this dude's there, and he's a little shorter, and I guess he has sort of a reputation of kind of acting out and being a little crazy. And so I'm there just hanging out, and this guy all of a sudden is like, you know what, I want to fight you. And this sounds, you know, totally made up, but this actually happened. And he's short, so he's probably got little man syndrome. And he says, you know what, I want to fight you. And I'm like, look, man, we're at a bar. I'm just hanging out. I don't really want to fight. And so he keeps pushing, and he's like, look, man, I just want to fight you right now in the parking lot. Let's go. And I was like, okay, let's go. And I stared him right in his eye, and he was like, you know what, you're serious. I don't want to fight you anymore. And so it was easy as that. You know what I mean? You just basically have to look them in the eye and stand up for yourself, right? Let them know you're serious. Say it with conviction. Say it with passion. Say it with a straight back. And let people know you're serious. You're not going to let them just walk all over you like a doormat. Because at the end of the day, if you do let them walk all over you like a doormat, and if you do, you know, try and de-escalate the situation, you look back on that, man. You look back on it, right? And you sit there late at night when you're going to sleep. You're looking back at that moment where you're thinking, man, I should have said something to that guy. Or, man, I should have like, you know, done something to escalate the situation in my favor, right? You're sitting there late at night, stuck in your head, thinking, man, I should have done something to kind of prove my own worth to myself, right? Because what you do after situations like that is you almost condition your body subconsciously to think, you know what, I'm not strong enough to stand up for myself. So I'm going to avoid these risky and uncomfortable situations because I don't think I'm strong enough to push through it and to basically show people that I'm serious, that I'm someone who demands respect, or anything like that, that I'm someone who has self-respect for that matter. You know, when you don't stand up for yourself in the situation, you look back on it and you feel like a dummy. Believe me, I've been there. There's plenty of times where I look back and I'm like, man, I should have said something to that guy, or I should have stood my ground for whatever reason. There's an instance that comes to mind at the gym, actually, which is kind of funny. So in my early 20s, I was working out back one day. And, there's this other guy who's also working out back. And I'm there, doing the pull-down machine with, it's the one where it's the two handles, and you basically reach up and you pull each handle down simultaneously with each hand. And so I got it, I got about 2 plates on there, nothing crazy. And this guy, he's sitting next to me, and his wife's recording him. And he's doing the seated row machine. Not the cable seated row machine, but the seated row machine where you actually put plates on there. And he's going hard. He's doing his thing. His wife's recording him, whatever. He's posting it on Instagram for his 176 followers that don't give a shit about what he's doing. So anyways, he's there, and he steals the plates off of my machine while I'm using it. And so I sit there and I look at him, and I'm like, you know what, this guy, he's going after it. I'm gonna leave it alone, whatever. And so I go and I grab some other plates and I load it up, and the guy comes over again and steals the plates that I was using. And at this point, I'm like, okay, this guy's trying to either agitate me or prove his dominance to his wife or something weird. And at moral of the story, I didn't say shit to the guy. And now I think about it all the time, and I'm like, man, if that was me now, like, the first instance of him even trying to take the plate, I would have said, yo, dude, what are you doing? Stop. Like, get your own plate. You know what I mean? I would have stood my ground, stood up, and confronted him head on, because now I'm in my late 20s, right? I'm an established adult. I've got some self-respect just through living life, achieving goals. and realizing that you can't let people walk all over you like a doormat. You can only take so much before you start to fight back, right? It's like it's literally like the Joker, right? He he's getting disrespected the entire movie, and then he fights back in a way that he feels is validating. And of course we don't have to go to that extreme, but it's almost maddening with how rude people are nowadays. And with how rude people are, you have to be self-aware enough to be just as rude to them. If you're not naturally a rude and disrespectful person, you have to condition yourself to be a rude and disrespectful person and call upon that when necessary. Even if you're just going through a fast food line, even if you're just going, through a Home Depot checkout, which, by the way, I've had some rude people at Home Depot, and I've told them mind your own business before. You just have to be able to stand your ground, and you have to be able to speak up for yourself. Because at the end of the day, that reconditions your mind to say, look, I'm a self-respecting adult, and, I'm not going to let people tread on me, right? Don't tread on me, and I'm not going to let you tread on me. So basically, moral of the story, stand up for yourself, have some self-confidence, and you'll feel like an alpha male boss, when you're walking around doing your thing. And basically, that's all I got to say. I'm trying to think. I don't think I had anything else I wanted to talk about. This podcast, this is just a introductory podcast. See how it goes. I'll upload some more, of course. I'll probably have some people on here to bounce some ideas off of. That way I can ramble a bit more and tell some more war stories about life and about what it's like to be in your late 20s and running a meme page. So anyways, thanks again for listening. This is the Dark Iron Gains Community Fitness Podcast, episode 1. If you have anything you'd like me to talk about, feel free to DM me or leave it in the comment section or whatever. So anyways, thank you again. Peace out. Bye.